This is the first video in the Making Your First series where I'll be going over making your very first drum loop for you ultimate beginners all the way to getting creative once you have your basic elements laid down. And this video is all about drums. So if we head over to the left and we click on instruments, we can see that a drum rack is over here, and let's just drag and drop that onto a new MIDI track. And when we drag and drop that onto a new MIDI track, we can see at the bottom our little empty drum rack feeling all lonely. So what's our next step? Well, we need to look for some drum one-shots to place inside of the rack. But wait, where do you actually get your drum samples from? Well, you can purchase sample kits online, or you can get a Splice or a Loop Cloud membership, or you can actually make them yourself. But depending on what version of Ableton Live you have, Ableton also includes some sounds that you can use too. So I've got my kick, which sounds like this. I've got a hi-hat, and I've also got a percussion. I just need to find the snare, so I'm going to come into the browser again, and I'm going to open up one of these sample packs. I'm just going to drag and drop this snare onto an empty pad. And there you go. So this section over on the right over here is used to manipulate our drum samples, our one-shots, but in today's tutorial, I'm keeping it super simple for you beginners. So how do we actually create a drum pattern now? Well, we have two ways of doing this, penciling in and recording in. So let's have a look at penciling in first. The very first thing we want to do is create a MIDI clip on our drum rack. And to create your MIDI clip, you just have to come to the first empty box in your session view and just double click. And when you double click, you can see our 4 sounds are loaded over here. And if we want to add more one-shot samples, they will just automatically be added to this list. So the piano roll will just automatically get bigger. So the very first thing we want to do is enable our little headphone sign just here. And the reason you want to do this is because it will allow you to hear exactly what you are programming in. So we can double click to add a MIDI note in, or we can actually press B on our keyboard to enable this draw mode. And just single click in. It's completely up to you. Either workflow is completely fine. Cool, so it's sounding really basic, and I'm going to turn my metronome on, and I'm going to count with my metronome. And you'll see that my kick is on the 1 and the snare is on the 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now for different genres, obviously this is going to be slightly different. For example, if we put a 4 to the floor on, I'm just going to turn my global tempo down just to demonstrate this. So I'm going to just delete this. I'm just going to go back to normal, and I'm going to select all these. So I'm just going to revert back to my first drum loop. Now, every time I play it, it's just really repetitive, and it just sounds the same over and over again. So what we want to do is we want to come over to the left over here and change the length to maybe about 4. And this will actually change our MIDI clip from a 1 bar to a 4 bar duration. So we can now continue on with our drum loop like this. So I just select it all with my mouse like that, and then I just press Command or Control D if you're on PC to duplicate, and this will now repeat for 4 bars. So I can actually start to add some more kicks in. Let's go with something like this maybe, and also some sort of double kick at the end, just to show the listener or tell the listener that my drums are sort of looping over, coming to an end. Do you see that variation in the drums now? Now it doesn't sound as boring as it first did when we only had that 1 bar MIDI clip. Now, just a quick little tip here, guys. When increasing that length, try sticking to 2, 4, 8, 16, etc., because as I mentioned, these numbers represent how many bars our drum MIDI clip is. And the reason you want to stick with these doubled numbers is because you'll most likely be producing in a 4/4 signature, and you'll want to make sure that your MIDI clips are nice and even throughout your track. And as you get more advanced, you can experiment with this and get a little bit more crazy. Now I've got my 4 bar kick and snare loop that is going on, but let's actually move on to the hi-hats now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to pencil in some really basic hi-hats. So I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to select them all. Then I'm going to press Command D or Control D again to just duplicate over and over. That's cool. So we're getting a little bit more of an interesting drum loop. And if I just select these all again, and I'm actually going to double these up. And we can tell now our hi-hats are much faster. And what we could do is we can actually fill these gaps So I can actually have something like this. And I'm actually just literally placing them anywhere. I have no idea how this is going to sound, but hopefully it sounds pretty good. Sounds pretty cool. It gives that sort of bouncy feeling to the track. So I'm probably going to stick with those. And if you want, you can actually right click and go to your fixed grid and change your grid settings. So the smaller the fraction on here, the finer your grid lines are going to be, allowing you to create some faster hi-hats throughout your track. So I'm going to maybe come to this one over here, and maybe I want that there and that there. That's pretty cool. But what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to select all of them and press shift and left. And I'm just going to make them all the same size because it's just a little bit easier. And I think that actually sounds pretty cool. We've also got this little percussion, haven't we, as well? So we can add this somewhere. So let's see if we just add it right at the end. So our drum loop has now been completed, but it sounds just a little bit too robotic. So a good way to humanize it would be to alter the velocity of the hi-hat. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all these hi-hats, and I'm actually going to drag this up at the bottom, and we can see this is our little velocity. Now, what we could do is actually, I can just single click on one and adjust all manually and stuff, but that's going to take way, way, way too long. So what you want to do is you want to select all of them. And you want to just come over to this little randomize bar and this little number bar over here. And I'm going to turn it down to maybe about, let's see, maybe about 18. Hit randomize, and we can see that it automatically randomized the levels of our hi-hats only. And that's because we selected our hi-hats. Now, if we didn't select anything, it would actually randomize all of our sounds in there. And we don't really want that, okay? Because we want our kick to be pretty powerful. We want our snare to be pretty powerful. And overall, we want it to carry the same velocity throughout the track. But obviously these are all guidelines, and if you want, you can turn down your kicks because there's literally no rules. I mean, if you want to turn down this one specific kick by itself, you can do that, but it's sort of obviously going to hide underneath your track. Now, a good little tip is to, if you've got maybe, if this was hair, for example, this kick was hair, I can actually turn this kick down so it's acting like a ghost kick. So if I press play, it's not a main kick, it's sort of slightly off, and it just sort of introduces a nice sort of velocity to it. But overall, when you want to keep things normal, you just want to keep things balanced as is. Now, if you've got a MIDI controller or a MIDI keyboard like I have right in front of me, you can actually record your drums in, just like you're recording a melody in. So I'm triggering all those on my keyboard, and to record in, we want to actually come to this record button that's actually in the session view in this scene itself. We don't want to use the main one. So I'm just going to hit that record. I'm going to make sure my metronome's on, and I'm going to play it in. Sounds cool, but if I actually open up the MIDI clip, we can see that some of our notes are not in time, are they? They're not exactly lined up. So you can press Command or Control A to select all of them, and then Command and U to quantize them. Now guys, there are plenty of ways to create drum patterns. As I said, I'm just using the drum rack here, but you can use Ableton's Impulse. You can drag and drop them into the arrangement view, as I said in the beginning of the video. Or you can actually use loops as well. If you really want to use loops, you can use them, mangle them, pitch them up, pitch them down. I will do a video on that as well in this series.